funding for Broomfield Soaring Eagle air monitoring site. The site will soon have the required 3-year baseline for NOx, ozone, PM, et cetera, making it an ideal site for this grant. Councilmember Anderson also wants to suggest recognizing that the gun ordinances will likely return in June, and Broomfield data points to suicide being the major cause. We really need to equally prioritize mental health discussions at upcoming study sessions. There's a lack of resources and hospital beds to address this immediate crisis. Councilmember Leslie suggested water sustainability strategies and construction development codes to guide new development, as well as somebody's typing it in, right? This is real time. This is real time government right here. Okay, as reducing water usage. Thank you. Good one. So that's what we have on the table. How do we want to consolidate it and or allocate time for these different?
Sure. I think if we could if we could go back to the top, and then we'll talk about the amount of time that should be allocated for each item, as well as there are some of the items that are listed are already scheduled for study sessions and or memos. So that might alter the council members' request. So do you want, Mayor, if I may, we'll just go item by item. Mm-hmm. So the economic and fiscal update, we anticipate that to be 90 minutes. We'll have the CFO, Brenda Ritchie, as well as Jeff Romine, the Director of Economic Vitality, will give you all a very similar snapshot to last year with the focus session, where we are, what we anticipated, what actually happened, what the shoring up looks like, and then how the 2023 budget fits in that with anticipated revenue and expenditures. The next topic, Councilmember Marsh Holshin, we added some notes that we do have the comprehensive housing update that is coming July 18th. Council and the community, again, just as a reminder, Broomfield Housing Alliance is different than the internal Broomfield Housing team. So Broomfield Housing Alliance is coming with a full update, and they would speak to the vouchers. So you can see there that the currently we have a 21 voucher program. Administering Section 8 vouchers is a heavy lift, and it's all about volume. So the more vouchers you have, the more likely you are to get more, and the more likely you are to then build your internal network and not have to count on others. Case in point, so staff or council approved an FTE at the beginning of 2022 to expand capacity so that we could go get additional vouchers, which we did. So we have 24 additional vouchers coming online this year. Once we are able to, again, with the Broomfield Housing Alliance, I know we have expectations that anytime we establish a new committee or group, there's generally a wait list of things that we've been waiting to give them, and then it requires them to kind of sift through. So that group is galvanized. And I think from a local voucher program, it's up, it's underway. They're eager to obtain more. After they absorb those additional 24 with the additional staffing, of course, from CCOB. I think we'll, throughout the legislative session, Councilmember Marsh Holshin, we'll have a much better sense. Councilmember Schaaf, we prepared a presentation for him today on the connectivity, the interconnectivity between transportation and housing and economic vitality and development. You can't fix this housing crisis by building more units. You can't build your way out of it. So happy to, I want to make sure we're delivering what you're hoping to get on this topic. So given what I just said, do you want to modify it? Do you want us to present? How would you like that topic to be discussed?
So I guess I was thinking, because I brought this up as a section 18A last
Mhm.
year, and we pushed it off to this, the focus session. And I had spoken to Sharon Tessier about it
Yeah.
a while ago, and she seemed to be on board with a rental registration idea. I know I heard that the legislature is talking about it.
They are.
I guess my thought was that the funding from the voucher program, or sorry, the funding from the registration could pay for the FTE necessary to run it, if we needed an extra FTE to run it. And then the rest of the funds could then be given to the Housing Alliance for vouchers. That was kind of my idea. And that about the registration could be waived for people accepting vouchers to then help people encourage more landlords to accept vouchers. Or low income, I guess is what I was thinking. So is,
If I may ask you, just for a clarification,
Yeah.
so rental registration, so that would not be for income aligned units, that would be for every rental unit in Broomfield?
that was my thought. That way, so you, like a business license, if you have to have you register for a business license with the clerk's office. Every rental, every landlord who has a rental property registers annually. Pays $100 fee. I mean, I guess I'm just making that up, but I'm kind of, what I was thinking. And then if their rental unit is being offered at an affordable rate, or if they have or they're currently accepting a voucher, then we waive the fee. Kind of to encourage them to accept vouchers to offer low income housing. I mean, obviously, there's no one single answer to the housing issue, and I thought this would just be one additional thing to help. And Sharon seemed to be in favor of the idea, so that was kind of the direction I wanted to go.
So then would the expectation, so it's interesting how when we say everything is interconnected, it truly is interconnected. So for example, the presentation that we just developed for Councilmember Schaaf for the Proposition 123. Where they are indicating they want, in order to tap into these dollars, you have to do some pretty significant things that may impact. But to your point on the rental registrations and kind of what that ratio is from an affordable unit that would be waived. The percentages, I apologize. Let's see. From 2019 to present, we have in the pipeline established 100 income aligned units that have been built. We have another portion, we'll see more and more now that the inclusionary housing ordinance cost to buy your way out is significantly higher. We're anticipating that that's going to generate a higher number of units versus the developer buying their way out. The reason that number is important is because your rental registrations will not hit the income aligned. So again, it's about 0.002% are income aligned along with all of our other market units. So the process would really, it would be more of a public opinion process, quite frankly, than it would anything else. So for this topic, we can come prepared with the number of market rate rental units. We can come with the average. It wouldn't matter what the average rent was, right? I mean, it would just be market rate, the number. Again, it would kind of like be going back to the minimum wage conversation of who's driving this, right? So from your business community, that would be a much bigger conversation about sorry, it's going from hot to cold in here. I would say let us get some anecdotal information, Councilmember Marsh Holshin. I don't think it's ripe for a policy discussion. I think it may be ripe after the legislative session when we see where that lands. And by then we will have data that we can actually have a much bigger, deeper conversation. And then waiting on the housing until Jen. So Abby, if we could get a study session, maybe in July, more like a legislative debrief. Yeah, well, so we're just waiting for the state to do all kinds of stuff, aren't we?
Maybe.
But we can have we'll have a legislative debrief, and this will be one of the items listed. Does that sound good? Okay.
If we survive.
All right, so let me jump back. So we will.
You want me to take council members in order? Were you done, Gene?
I was gonna say, I also added to that about the universal housing application.
Yeah, I wonder if just at this focus session, we don't have to necessarily discuss all of these issues. So I do want to take like a higher scope as far as like what structure we're looking at in the future, talking about our priorities and those sorts of things. But I do think it might be worth it for us to maybe get together and write down maybe on sticky notes or whatever, do something kind of fun, have ideas for housing. And then like let it filter through if staff wants to take a shot at it later on. Just it seems like we have a lot of ideas bubbling up that would, give staff more direction. And then we can have that study session later on as far as like where things actually settle. So, and I'm sure staff is well aware of what's happening at the legislature as well. So take it as a grain of salt, but we can always throw ideas out there. They don't all stick.
So if Mayor, if I may, so the thought of Councilmember Hinkle, maybe we have a 90-minute brainstorm. But we keep it in time limits and perhaps it's within these categories. So it's not kind of like a topic free-for-all sticky session, but it's more about our community goals that we're going to roll out and the KPIs. And so if you all can really look at those KPIs and how do we either enhance it or kind of what the programs are that are attached to it so that we're not creating a whole new level of, or we can, we can just have hey, this would just be a really great idea session.
Well, if I may, on the housing, isn't that what housing authorities do?
Oh, the universal application?
Right.
Local governments don't have a housing application.
Right.
So
Would it be helpful for us to invite the Broomfield Housing Alliance to that session so that we can share our input or, collaborate with them, since we really haven't had a chance to do that since we appointed, informed them?
So the anticipated conversation back and forth with council and their update is scheduled for July.
Okay.
So those pieces again
Already in the
about,
pipeline.
it is,
Okay.
it is.
Then we don't need to take time to do it. Okay. Councilmember Cohen?
Mayor, so can I get
You done?
clarification on the sticky note exercise?
Okay, yes. Sticky note.
So idea sticky note or are we gonna stay in alignment with the community goals and the KPIs?
Yeah, I suppose we could wait. I just don't know why the Housing Alliance can't hear like ideas from us in the meantime, as they come back, later on.
Sure.
So it doesn't have to be a big deal. But I do think it'd be nice for them to, hear from council just in a non-formal way. Maybe there's ideas that they haven't thought about yet that we've had constituents maybe come to us with or something like that.
So I'm just going to continue to follow up to make sure that we have, so is the thought then to have the Housing Alliance folks join the focus session on Saturday for a period of time to give them ideas?
I would always appreciate that, but I understand that you say that they're going to come back in July. I just don't know how much input they would want from us from now through till July. Maybe we could ask them.
You can check with them, see if they want input.
You bet.
Okay. Councilmember Cohen.
Real quickly, I would echo, I think it would be great to have the Housing Alliance there just to hear what's top of mind for them before July, if there's something they want us to think about. But I just was wondering if we could make this more holistic in terms of having a status report on housing in Broomfield. I'm sure you have the data on where we are in occupancy, where we are on rental rates, what the trends are, where the housing authority is in terms of budget and projects, so that we can determine what the priorities should be later on. Because I think we all have an anecdotal sense of housing in
Sure.
Broomfield, but we don't necessarily have maybe of the most current data. And whether it's, the trailer court issues, rental issues, I know I am not prepared at all to discuss the rental cap issue. No idea. It'd be nice to have a little bit of, or if there's other initiatives other communities in the area have taken on recently, what the results are that we could consider.
You bring up a great point, Councilmember Cohen, because, rent stabilization is a big topic.
Yep.
Is there any benefit to us maybe discussing the pros, cons, anecdotal successes, failures? Is that something, because it may be upon us soon in June. Depending on how things go.
Yes, and yes.
You think it's a
So
good idea?
if we have some, if we have some latitude on what that program looks like, if you will,
Mhm.
let's say 90 minutes, and just kind of an update of where we were, where we are, where we're going, and those external forces that may impact that.
Oh, and there's plenty.
Does that sound good?
I get. Thank
Okay,
you,
great.
Councilmember Cohen. That's
Okay.
a great one. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks, Councilmember Henkel.
we better.
And anyone else?
I'm Jeff, 90 minutes.
No? No, we're good.
Let's see, Councilmember Marsh Holshin, the council involvement in CCOB budget drafting process. I think we talked a little bit about that in the session a moment ago. I think we've transitioned for the last 2 years away from kind of that one and done. So it's a year-round effort. Every memo that you all either approve or don't approve essentially is impacting that budget. We have, part of that planning document is having a consistent, each one of the applicable memos will have the financial implications very similar to the development memos that we have, that again, it's the cumulative effect that we need council focused on, not project by project or those one and dones. And so how we structure the memos, how we structure the budget revisions, how we categorize those budgets or buckets rather, that, for example, it's not going to be a cornucopia of items during each revision. The first revision is that you all will see shortly is the shoring up, understanding what the closeout is from the 2022 budget, what that rollover is, what the level of commitment is. And it'll be a great tagline when we talk about the economic and fiscal update, having those ongoing dialogues about where we are in that budget. So we need to make sure that it starts with the community goals. It starts with the council priorities for the KPIs and those costs that are associated. So you all have identified the 5 community goals. You all have identified for staff the KPIs, which is the council priorities. The funding mechanisms, our budget will be in alignment with those goals and those KPIs. Every time we come back, we will have those individual budgets broken down into the community goals with those fiscal impacts. So again, it's a fluid conversation. So when we look at the second, so the first budget amendment will be end of February, March, which every year from as we move out, it's the shoring up of the year before budget. And then we move into the second budget amendment. So you all approved the 2023 budget in October, and we finalized it in December. As we move forward on each one of these council priorities, anytime that there is a shift, we need to have that attached. Or if the CIP projects come in too high. So again, you all have approved the CIP projects. We come back for a revision. So again, every decision is impacting the budget by design, because it allows us that cumulative effect. We have the budget creation, the adoption, and the third amendment, which was August, September, October. That's when we will have our all of our community engagement pieces. So our budget workshop, our economic development, our overall development, right? So again, the community, we tape those, we post those. We have a 3-month process of feedback and engagement. And the reason it's so important to be able to have these community goals and the KPIs is because then we're all speaking the same language. We're all working from the same playbook. And the community has a level of expectations of the direction that you all are headed in. Every memo that comes plays right into that. And then we move into the department head updates and presentations. And then we move into the adjustment period. And then we do the finalization. 4th budget amendment if we need it. So for your item, specifically, given what that layout is, what would you anticipate us to bring for that particular item?
Staff need to bring anything specifically. It was the idea that we approve things as we go along, like you said. And so my thought was that it would be impossible for 10 council members to do a deep dive into the budget along with staff while it's being drafted. But maybe a subcommittee like we did with the evaluations. Maybe 2 or 3 council members that we appoint from amongst ourselves that are in the meetings with staff doing when the stuff is being hashed out and drafted and that kind of thing. That was kind of my idea. I did run it by the mayor. So that was my thought. It wouldn't necessarily need staff to bring information, just kind of whether or not we would want to, that's something that we would want to do collectively, I guess is the thought. Just a discussion about it.
How many minutes would you like us to allocate to you for that discussion?
No more than 30 to 90, maybe at the very most. 60.
It's kind of light. We do have time. I think understanding how, that sausage making part is done might be helpful for us to understand too. Like I remember the first time I looked at the budget, I would go line by line and going, really, do we need to spend money on that field when we could use it for other things? And those kinds of questions
Sure.
came up. And we don't really question a lot, obviously, because we rely on the expertise of our departments, to prioritize what needs to be done. But is there that latitude to question? Could this be, I know that's where you're going.
And not
right?
just at the very end, a yes or no vote,
Right.
kind of in the process of it being, because to me, the budget is by definition a policy document. So. Yeah, the sausage making well before the vote is taken to yes or no, I guess is the thought, so.
It's a little horrifying, I got to admit. But I welcome the conversation. So we have it down for,
60 minutes?
yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Councilmember Lim, progress towards municipal GHG zero waste sustainability goals, EPC, state and federal funding opportunities.
So my thought is that we do have a map of what's coming forward for the year with sustainability goals with the greater community. So we have, our universal collection emphasis and in the first half, and then basically what this plan says is that we'll concentrate on the water issues late in the second half. But in the background, I mean, we set in our GHG plan and in our zero waste plan, separate goals that are actually a little more aggressive for the municipality. So we're not hearing that information, what kind of progress we're making on those. And, if we have, I guess I'd like to hear, do we have some possibilities that the staff is looking into with funding opportunities from the federal money that will be released? And then I'd also like to hear an update on the EPC contract.
So on August 18th. I'm sorry. That's everybody paying attention to say, oh my God, August, April 18th, we are coming with, I don't think it's in this document though. Look, I go from March to May. Sorry, you all. Yes, we have a study session. We have a study session for August 18th. It's a full comprehensive sustainability update on the goals, the data, ACES, EPC, and universal collection.
August?
April.
April
18th.
18th. Okay, our plan only says universal collection update.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Your plan, this is what happens when Kelly doesn't make the copies and Jennifer makes the copies. We have all odd pages. She did an abbreviated one and just left out April.
Yeah.
Which one, what am I looking at? Because it includes the discussion regarding potential strengthening amendments to the energy code. So it's a whole sustainability night. Oh, there's two docs. Oh, okay. Councilmember Lim,
Yes,
it's coming on August 18th.
August. No,
God, I'm
April.
so sorry, April. Snap.
You're
It's
stuck on
coming.
August. What's?
Okay.
I don't know what's happening on, yeah.
Summer, yes.
So it's the sustainability update,
Okay.
goals, ACES, EPC, universal collection, and a discussion regarding potential strengthening amendments to the energy code. So it's
Okay,
a whole night of sustainability on April 18th.
April 18th.
that's good. Okay, that covers it.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schaaf had a
Yeah.
question that we need to go back to. Councilmember Schaaf?
Yeah, so just on the financing and looking at the budgeting process. So we've had, as a council, we've had kind of the budgeting finance 101, we've had the finance 102. We've kind of had these overviews and they're much more kind of in general how our budget functions.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if this topic can be much more of a real time. So as we're looking towards this year, we're looking at what are our revenue projections? What does it look like our expenses are going to be? Can we start to get more of a snapshot of what we can expect this year is going to hold in terms of our revenue, in terms of our expenses? What is the health of our community going to look like? So that we can view it more of as we start to have some of these conversations about community priorities, about KPIs, are these things going to actually be realistic happening this year? Or is this something that we're going to have to push off to the next year? So much more of, not so much in the weeds of how many pencils are we buying, but more of how many departments are we funding?
Yes,
Wouldn't that be in the first
yes,
presentation? Okay, we're
yes.
gonna kick it off with organizational. fiscal.
yes. And,
That is-
and again, and part of it is now that we have the structure to be able to look in hindsight, I mean, how accurate are our projections? So are we within 3%, 7%, 9%? And what is that methodology in order to calculate those projections? So now that things have stabilized, we look back at 2021 and 2022, it's that restabilizing year. So then when we look at those projections for 2022, what we don't want to do, and part of our internal budgeting is, and I'm sure if anybody's listening or when they watch this, when we talk about that, the trickle down, right? The zero-based budgeting, that it just doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because there's no forgiveness for those trends. So part of the economic and fiscal update will be how close we were to the projections for 2022. Do we apply that same methodology for the calculations and projections for 2023? Or do we increase, right? So the guidance, Councilmember Schaaf, to Mr. Romine and to Brenda is to remain ultra conservative. So even if our trends are indicating 3.8% up in sales tax, we do not build a 2023 budget based on a 3.8%, right? We continue to be able to have that capacity level. And that's why on the goals, when we review them, right, it's not just about keeping the bond rating, but it's about increasing what those revenues are. So it's a much bigger, it's not a counting pencils. It's a where did we think we were going to end and why did we think we were going to end there? How far off were we? Do we apply that same methodology to 2023? Because we have a pretty good sense of 2023 expenses because we back in, right? So we base on revenue, not expenses. So we have a good sense operationally of where we're going to be. And do we apply the 12 to 30% range, if you will, not just for inflation, but for all those other things that were the increase in construction cost so that's the biggest swing that we'll ever have. Personnel, we have a really good sense of what that is and what that looks like. And that helps, to your point, staff prioritize. So as we go into 2023, knowing that the state is going to, I don't want to say nosedive, but it's by the time the long bill comes, all of Colorado will have a really good sense of building programs based on one-time dollars and what unfunded mandates look like. And those are things that you can't really project, and that's why we have to build in that capacity. But from our internal perspective, when we talk about FTEs, we're not approving new programs in 2023. The FTEs that we are looking at are in departments that generate revenue or keep us safe. So those are the priorities from a level perspective of no more expansion. That's the type of conversation that we'll be able to have along with the data and the numbers in that first category.
Of course. Any other questions or you want to continue down the list? All right, next is Councilmember Ward, Community Engagement and Council Travel Budgets. Are you with us, Councilmember?
You caught me just in the nick of time.
Oh, good. You're up.
Wonderful. So this really originated out of last week's council meeting when we discussed the council's Q4 expenditures for travel and all that fun stuff. And whether or not we should do updates to how much the budgets are. And also having, I know we're only given like 500 for community engagement. Should that be expanded, and can we use that and get staff support for, if we want to have town halls and getting that notice to our residents, either via mail or a Facebook post or something like that, just so we have a wider net cast in who we are reaching, because not all of us necessarily use Facebook, and not all of us necessarily have a huge following on Facebook or any other social media platform. So that was just kind of that, and I just kind of threw out 30 minutes because it's what I came up with.
All right, sounds good. So do you think that it would be a good discussion to have how we can increase our community engagement and outreach? An example I put out there last week was ward meetings that are supported with staff and actually promoted on our channels. They may take a while to get momentum and but I know that I've had questions about it. We've had invitations to, to do them, but it's hard to do it by yourself. So maybe that's worth having a conversation if you guys are interested. Anybody? Nope. Yeah, thumb up. And talking about travel budgets and the increases in prices, maybe we should revisit. Any problem with that? Yeah, we can, yes, go ahead, Councilmember. So I'm still treating it like it's a round
Yeah,
table.
so I mean, I'm okay having the conversation. I just think that, that this is definitely one of those that, to our previous conversation about finances, it's gonna mix with that one. So I think that, I'm definitely engaged for the community engagement and how that works and how do we continue to move that forward and do a better job of interacting with our community. I think that that's a very important topic.
All right. So we'll keep that on the agenda for 30 minutes.
I agree.
Mayor Pro Tem is not wrong with 10 people. So we do have, we've got a day and a half, so we can do 60 minutes.
I'm fine with making it 60. I just threw out the 30-minute number just to put something in there.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you, Councilmember Ward. Are you going to leave us now?
Yeah, I have to go pick up my mom.
All right. Well, you stay warm and safe. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Shaft's ballot measures.
Yeah, so they're not my ballot measures.
I
Did that once before. And successful, by the way.
Yeah.
But I think that, there are a couple things that, I'm laser focused on and, having a successful ranked choice voting election happening in 2023. That's definitely one of them. And the other one is looking at those, 2023 ballot measures. And we've discussed this a little bit. So I saw the note that staff added this on to February 21st council meeting. So I'm fine with waiting until then to have that conversation. And I look forward to hearing, what that looks like.
Wonderful.
That sounds great. We appreciate that. And just quickly on the ranked choice voting, that's been a topic du jour for the end of last week and the beginning of this week. It's another example of they don't quite know how to roll that out or what the costs are going to be or what the ballot's going to look like. It sounds like Boulder is walking back for 2023. Ranked choice voting needs to be implemented by 2025. Dominion doesn't have the appropriate software. So if we move forward with 2023, without the software, it'll be a hand count. So that will be something that the council needs to discuss as we move forward. We're continuing to work with the state and the other communities, but at this point, we would be the only one doing 2023 ranked choice voting. Right, ranked choice voting. I can't ever, we will, as we solidify that, those components, Councilmember Schaaf, we will be back in front of council, particularly when we get the information back from the Secretary of State's office. And Dominion. Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Question, I don't want to delve too deeply into this.
Yeah.
That's not the purpose, but just trying to figure out what the holdup is. We're not the first community ever to do this, and I know Aspen has done it, right? They're not doing it anymore, but they did it at some points. Did they do it hand or was there different software? I'm not sure why it's so difficult.
I am not the resident expert on it. I know just enough to tell you what I just told you, which is the software issue. And I think a lot of folks are stuck that the communities that have in fact done it have made a decision not to do it again. So folks are paying attention to that.
Is that appropriate for a discussion at our retreat or, I mean, I don't know, Councilmember
I don't know if
Schaaf?
we'll have the information by then, to be honest with you. I mean, we need to ensure, I want to be able to give council more information than, particularly if we can do it versus, and I don't think we'll know if we can do it.
So I was fully expecting that
By
we were going to be
March.
doing this, so it's kind of a shock to me that we won't be available. I mean, it'll be 2 years since it was passed, right?
Yeah,
So the fact that this is an issue is
the state has to certify.
probably
the-
shocking to Councilmember Schaaf, it's shocking to me.
Yeah, well, the state has to certify the software. And so you have to have the software in order to have it certified. So it's not even a chicken or the egg, right? You have to have the software in order to have it certified. And the more delay there is between those two, us contracting directly with Dominion would be the solution for us for our municipal piece. So we need to figure out if that's even feasible. So we're in contact right now with the Secretary of State, trying to figure all that out.
I'd love to have an update on that at some point.
Sure. Yep, we'll get that.
Good to know. Thank you. Councilmember Schaaf, anything else? Okay. And then Councilmember Henkel, government transparency structure, reducing the email traffic for both council members and staff.
Thank you, Mayor. I like to use these work sessions to sort of work on a lot of our soft things that we don't really get to work on, like in a regular study session, or that's really sort of, heavily staff driven. We realize that staff's gonna have to prepare for this, but I really appreciated the last update when it talked about how we're going to open up more discussions on the Broomfield Voice. I liked that. I would like to figure out, just better ways where people can engage with their government officials and avoid emails as much as possible. Just to have that sort of, on a public platform like the Broomfield Voice. So it could be that it could be a more in-depth update on how we're using the Broomfield Voice, how it's planned to be used, how we can guide our residents through using that as well. I mean, it's sort of a teaching moment where we can learn how we can guide our residents on how to use that more. Even overlooking our entire new website, right? Sort of guiding through that and how people can engage with it. But I definitely, and of course, I've always been a proponent of this, is using emails more for internal things. And then I like the Broomfield Voice because I can actually read constituents' input all in one place. And then it also eliminates a little bit more on the staff side. I imagine, putting it all in one Google document. There will still be some maintenance on it, but just ways that we can just create more transparency in that aspect. And to be honest, we received some, anonymous, I don't know how we're going to have to deal with that. I think we're always going to get anonymous emails. But at the same time, figuring out if we can figure out if we're listening to our actual residents or not. I don't know what that looks like, but maybe we can look and see what other governments are doing to improve their government transparency with their residents and have it be less email laden. I'm imagining it like a Slack, except for it's like all public. Slack channel that just, that's what I'm envisioning in my head. So I'm just thinking of ways that we can kind of be more efficient as a government.
All right. Do you feel like that is being addressed to an extent in terms of the email communications, the form, the button, or do you feel like we need to hammer out some other solutions?
I do think we need to hammer out some other solutions.
Okay.
Yeah, because I do think, and I can even look up some other ways too to help. I mean, that's doesn't have to be all on staff, but just ways that we can utilize the Broomfield voice so that we can learn, our constituents can learn. You can never have, too much knowledge as far as that's concerned. Yeah. I don't think it's going to take too long. And then the next one, do you want me to just cover the next one? Chief, since
Sure.
that's next.
Might as well keep going.
Just the community priorities. Color me stupid here, but when we first were elected in 2019, we did sort of a survey for community priorities. And we've held those, and I'm just curious if we're going to do another survey of the community. Like, what is the general plan for that? Is it every 2 years? Is it every 3 years? And I also just think that we need to look at our community priorities for our newer council members, and just sort of go through all of these in a little bit deeper dive.
So a couple of things. Yes, this is the year for the community survey. Julie's working on it now.
Okay.
We will also have pulse surveys this year with Magellan to do kind of the snapshot surveys and not have the full robust or in addition to that. So we'll have the draft to council, this week, if not next week, for the community survey. Again, we're planning to send mid to end March. We'll get it back July. Results tabulation and presentation August, September. In addition to that, again, having the capability with so much smartphone access to be able to do those pulse surveys. So again, the council priorities are your KPIs, right? That you all signed off on. And so again, the community goals are the 5 overarching buckets that everything else is going to be in. And the priorities really are those KPIs.
And do
Help
we
me.
want to dive into those further? I mean, is that something that we want to discuss further with these updates? And that I'm asking the other council members if that's something that we just want to, cover for 60 minutes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I like what she's saying. I think it's probably a good idea in my mind. Maybe it's what we're suggesting is to make sure that the council priorities are in line with the community priorities. And I don't know if that's something that we can do or not. But see, there's always a possibility there's a disconnect, and I'm not sure if we've had that chance to review and say, hey, this is this is the feedback we're getting from the citizens. Are we in line?
Well, 2 years ago, affordable housing was the top. It's still in the top 5. Sustainability was in the top 5. Transportation improvements, top 5. Public safety, still a priority. I don't know. I think that's where these came from, that last community survey, and they haven't changed until we get new responses, but that won't be until later in the year. So all we can do is finish the year on what we know was the priorities for the last year or two. And
Well,
does that make sense?
So I'm hearing,
Yeah, I
so I'm hearing 2 different things. Councilmember Hinkle, well worth doing a deeper dive, especially in a public forum for these KPIs. So when we're rolling in from the prior council priorities, not having the standalones, right? Not having oil and gas as a priority, not having really growing and maturing over the last 3 years to be able to take those individual topics and collapse them into what these community buckets are. So the KPIs really are council priorities, and we built the council priorities based on all of your comments and feedback and direction over the last 2 years.
So I definitely think it'd be worth it to talk about, you know, whether it's called community priorities or council priorities. I mean, they're one of the same, they should be. Our council priorities are probably just more in depth than what the community responded with. I will say, just as an aside a little bit, when we do those surveys, this kind of goes into my next subject, which I won't touch yet, but just the grant writing process and how are we collecting data for that grant writing process. But I guess heading into it, you know, talking about our KPIs and really explaining the process of gathering that information a couple of years ago for our new council members. I think it doesn't hurt for us to cover this too.
Sure.
But definitely, you know, taking a deeper dive into KPIs, what do they mean? You know, hearing more explanations, the work that's gone in the past, you know, we're going to do ghost of the past, the present and the future, right? We can even do a fun little icebreaker maybe about that. But just, you know, catching everyone up to speed, because I think a lot of times our government actually is really slow because some people don't know enough. And some people know more because they've been on council longer. So I think it's kind of, it evens the playing field a little bit more. And I know that like Paloma is going to be drinking out of a fire hose, but I do think it's important to give the historical value to a lot of these as well.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I've kind of seen a little bit of those snippets being pushed out on our social media channels, the 2022 accomplishments in our priority sectors. So the information is being compiled, but maybe just to kind of like a check-in, like this is how far we've come since we've made this a priority, and to really make sure everybody's following along. Does that make sense?
It does.
You have a question?
Yeah,
Okay,
yes, it does.
All right.
does that
Yay.
help?
Yeah.
Councilmember? Okay.
Sometimes I get lost in my words.
No,
I was like trying to make sense because you know, as a former teacher, you always want to make sure, you know, you always don't have to cater to the new kid in class, but you do have to make them feel welcome. And then any sort of, you know, mentorship that we can have from our elder council members and mayor would be helpful too. So, and then the last one on here I put is just because we don't really talk about grant writing here during study sessions. We don't talk about it during our council meetings. And just sort of knowing and understanding, just because this is what we learned at one of the conferences, is that when you send out these surveys, the information that you get back, you can actually use that information. Obviously, you guys know this, but you can use that information in that particular language of those surveys to apply for grants. So sometimes we might have some grants in mind, and if we can ask in a certain way on those surveys, you know, for instance, if we talk about safety and how, you know, people feel safe in the community or whatnot, maybe we could apply for certain grants to improve safety. But there's certain languages that the NLC was pushing out, and they said, hey, if you can communicate in the same way that another place is communicating, and you can compare cities and counties, and you can say, hey, we really want to be, you know, where this other city and county is, and we use the same language as they do, you're more likely to be approved for a grant. But I just don't hear a lot about what grants we plan on applying for, or what could be a hindrance in applying for those grants, or if we, you know, whatever plans that we have for grant writing.
Yeah, we're happy to go over that. I mean, we apply for over 151 grants every year. There isn't really any association and or topic that we either don't chase, or again, it's grant writing it's complex, and administering it is even more complex. So I want to drill in a little bit more about
Maybe we could talk about where we have been. We don't have to go through all the 100 or more grants that we've, applied for and accepted, maybe some things, some grants that have been real game changers for us. And maybe plans in the future as to how we're going to apply for grants or, where we're finding gaps in funding where we apply for grants in the future.
Can I think about that?
Yeah.
Okay. One thing that takes Broomfield out of a huge chunk of grants is that we have one of the highest average median incomes. And a lot of these grants are not designed for entitled communities.
I think we need to repeat that for all the people.
Well, I'll let you do that.
I'm just joking. I'm joking.
Yeah, again,
Yeah.
finance has we talked a little bit about what kind of what beefing that up looks like. We have expert grant writers in the individual topics. So we're exploring right now with the department heads, does it make sense? Again, remember, we said the priority for FTEs is either generating dollars or the safety piece, right? Or infrastructure, which is included in our public safety. What are those gaps? So we're working through what that piece is now. We don't know if there's a gap. We know there's a gap from the overall administration piece, but we have more of an issue. When we chase it, we get it.
Mhm.
And so then it's administering it that seems to be our gap, not the getting it gap.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But let me think more about how that could be a fruitful session.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I know like transportation's in the mix there too, and
Well, that's 65%.
piece of it. Yeah.
And then 30% is human services, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay. We can
That's a
let that kind of
perfect-
settle.
Segue into Councilmember Anderson's.
Oh, there you go.
Grant request. So we're not eligible for any grants because of our AMI.
well, I don't want to say we're not eligible for any grants because we get we get a lot of grants. But the grants that you all hear about and see at NLC and NACO, those are generally, those are not necessarily difficult for us to be able to say, do we qualify or not? We need to, in the budget, ensure that we have matching dollars. And one of the things that, again, from a grant perspective, oftentimes grants are short-lived. They're one-time dollars. And oftentimes you, on the front end, from a community perspective, have to say, okay, in 3 years when this grant ends, we're going to pick this tab up. So again, it's not getting them is not the difficult part. Administering them is not the difficult part. Keeping them is not the difficult part. D, all of the above is the difficult part. So again, you want to ensure that they're sustainable internally, even if you do qualify for them. You need to make sure you have the matching dollars, and you need a really you need a person that really has a great oversight. There's a lot of really good software out there right now. But oftentimes, chasing the data without having a targeted approach gets you a whole lot of stuff, and people spend, an innate amount of time chasing those down. And so is volume where we want to be? No, it isn't. So again, it's the knowing where we are, knowing the grant match that we have, knowing that it's not one time, or finding those grant opportunities that have operations attached, which is few and far between. But then your community becomes reliant, whether it be on the programs or otherwise, and you hope in that time it becomes a priority. Mental health is an excellent example. It's a national priority. It's a Broomfield priority. I mean, suicide prevention is something that is near and dear to Director Volling and Deb and all of those folks over there, because they're really on the front lines of what that looks like. And so grants for those, we know over a 5-year period of time, that's a priority. And so it puts it in a different bucket of how much we're willing to invest short-term and long-term. Because it really hits all, that's just an example of one of those, Councilmember Schaaf could probably give us a school, quite frankly, on all the transportation grants. That is you got to have a PhD just to write one of those darn grants. Good thing we have a PhD with Sarah Grant here to write those grants.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm even more impressed. All right, does that take us to Councilmember Anderson?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so this was a very specific request, which falls right on the grant request. And this was trying to get ahead of the conversation that would inevitably come at the end of this year, where we are faced with this decision of whether we can justify keeping the 2 air quality monitoring stations or whatever subcomponent of that system running while we transition from what we were in before with the pre-production to now being in production on the unknowns. So the Broomfield Soaring Eagle Station has almost 3 years of data, and that is a baseline requirement to be accepted for the NAAQS standards. It monitors ozone and particulate matter, making this an ideal site. And it also sits, midway between, the Weld County area of the DJ Basin, where the prominent source of the ozone precursors is oil and gas, down into the Denver metro area where it becomes, traffic influence. This is like an ideal location. And so my question here was, and I can't do this on my own, but the question is, can someone like myself or can a staff member just look into those grant opportunities with the possibility that if the EPA or the AQCC or some other entity at this moment, when there's also HB 1244 passed last year, and for whatever opportunity there is, to seek and see if we could find an opportunity where this station that's already built and running, remaining in our control, could potentially get grant funding to keep it running for another year, 2, 3, whatever, and understanding that without it, it might be the end after this year. That was my thought here, but I don't want to start, looking into these opportunities, without, I don't have the authority to do that. So I just don't want to let this opportunity pass that could save the station. That was my thought.
So
And this one also falls in that we are not a low income community,
Yeah.
which if we were, this would be a,
slam dunk.
yep, exactly.
Yes. So my question would be, I think we take this offline. I don't think it's for the focus session because it's a pretty quick to yes or no, quite frankly. Councilmember Anderson, so there's grants out there right now? Or you want us just to keep an eye on getting the grants? Or
No, I believe there actually is some grant funding because the state is required to increase the number of stations monitoring these criteria pollutants. We
Okay.
have to do a little bit of research, but now is the time. I don't know the exact, which is the ideal way, but I think a little bit of,
yeah, why don't you
research
send
and
it to us?
coordination.
We'll dig into it.
okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Sure.
So just say 0 minutes.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we'll update this.
There's several people in this document. It's fascinating to watch all these little cursors going around. Fix it.
Sorry, I put an extra 0 in there.
600 minutes. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Anderson. And then we'll move on to your next one on the gun ordinance, mental health.
Oh. Yes, I was like updating it. Okay.
They'll
So-
do that.
Okay, so this request has 960 minutes assigned. Okay, so in all seriousness,
I know.
I think one thing that shocked probably all of us on council and a lot of our constituents is when we were looking at the gun ordinances and the data came forward, that you start to look at the data really show we have a significant number of suicides in Broomfield.
Mhm.
And also, I don't want to just tie this to the gun ordinance because there are also other forms of suicide, more prevalent than via gun. So, I just feel like, we have the data, we've seen it. I think staff already, my Director Valiant probably has already seen some of this, and it just became more to our awareness. And I feel like while we continue these discussions of, the gun ordinances, which is what brought this data to light, that we also equally need to address that concern of mental health and I don't know what the solution is, but there's definitely a lack of resources, lack of hospital beds, sometimes lack of just recognition that somebody's in a crisis. So I think we just need to have that discussion and maybe we've already done enough. I mean, as Director Valiant gives the update, that might bring to light that that in the past, the things we've done have been enough to address it, or maybe something new will come out of it that we should then address. That was my thought.
And I think it's great. It is a huge priority for Broomfield, so it fits in perfectly with our community health improvement plan and having Director Volling give us some updates. Councilmember Staff.
Thank you, Mayor. So I appreciate Councilmember Anderson bringing this forward. This years ago was the top community priority. Came out of our surveys. It was something that was talked about, and that was pre-pandemic. So I think that, as we come out of this pandemic, this has still got to be one of our major priorities. And I think that as we've talked through this with Director Valling, we've heard that the state has a major role to play in this area. And I think that we as a council need to continue to be informed in what that role is that state can play, and continue to push on the state on the betterment of our constituents to ensure that they act in those ways so that they can better support our constituents, better support our state in terms of our behavioral health.
We couldn't agree more. Jason is excited to come. Again, this is their teen suicide is and it's fascinating because that is one of the areas of the grants that isn't kind of income qualified. Yeah, so we put 90 minutes for that. My gut is telling me it should probably be 120 minutes, only because we thought in addition to Jason, it would be great to have mental health partners there from the front line, and Councilmember Anderson, they have a much better sense because they're the service provider, so they have a much better sense of capacity and the hurdles around that. So yeah, if it's all right with you all, we'd like to do 120 minutes. We've already reached out to mental health partners, so they could just kind of do a co-presentation on where we are, where the state is, and why it's so damn high in Broomfield.
And Councilmember Cohen, you had a comment on mental health.
Just a quick note. I mean, I was initially didn't like the framing of this in terms of in the context of gun ordinances,
Yeah.
in the sense that research will tell you that people with severe mental health are much more prone to violence, but they're also more prone to be victims. And that there are many other factors to gun violence or other violence that is not quote unquote mental health, which includes drugs, substance abuse, childhood history of being a child abused as a child, impulse, anger management, things that are not necessarily considered mental health issues when people talk about that. So to the manager's point, I mean, I think there's two issues there, not only just mental health services and access in this community, which is extremely hard to get, largely to a lack of providers, which is beyond our control, but that's a statewide issue, but also just violence in general. We don't have a public safety issue on this agenda. I don't know if this would be the place to add it in terms of, not that we have a severe problem, but it's obviously a high public concern or a perception that we have a public safety issue, and particularly of auto theft and property crime.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I was going to bring that up, but to piggyback on that last comment, I was going to ask that question. We don't have a public safety. So is there something coming up study session wise, or if not, I would want to add something like that
Chief
on.
Templeman has an update coming, right?
She does. but it's not, so I just want to bring to council's attention really quickly that all of your topics fit in our buckets. They do. And so I really like that suggestion. We'll both of them. We won't combine them just so that we have some transitional piece. But I think an update from Chief Hempelman as well as kind of get again, I think it would be great to hear from one of the school resource officers, and that is where the combination is. So again, the boots on the ground. So not just from the chief's perspective, but we can do a kind of a 50,000 foot where we're headed. But again, bringing it back, and that will really be the tie into Councilmember Anderson's is what we're seeing from a service perspective. Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
And those are separate topics. I mean,
Yes, they are.
they're entwined, but I mean, public safety is much more than
Connected,
just,
but
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
no, we got it. Yeah, great suggestion.
Connected by the B Corps co-responder program.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, and then is that all, Councilmember Anderson? Thank you. Good topic. And then lastly, Councilmember Leslie, let's talk about water sustainability strategies.
I thought the team did a great job of bringing forward codes around EV application for new development. And we approved that with really out a lot of debate, but it allowed us to go forward in our engagement with developers without having to spend time asking how many EV stations are you going to put into this particular, development. We need to do the same thing in other areas as well. And water is one that has been gaining really almost more international concern, not just national and certainly not just Western. It's particularly important as we are in some ways the source of water for not just Colorado, but for other states as well. So it's a really increasingly important issue. And when you read about cities in Arizona that are literally being cut off from water. I talked to a friend of mine the other day in San Antonio, and she has a well and the well has gone dry. She now has to pay $650 a month to have her cistern filled twice a month for her family's personal use. I mean, this is not, just a story. This is real. Anyway, point I want to get to, and you've done a great job, I think, city manager, to pull the trigger on issues around sustainability, particularly related to the HOAs. But we need to extend that beyond HOAs to the individual homeowners and users. But we also need to develop codes like we did with the EV issue so that developers have clarity over what we think is appropriate for the construction that's before us. There's a lot here, but I know your team is already doing some good work. The team presented a water report, if you will, a couple of months ago. I thought they unveiled some very good work that's going on that's generally not known by us and by others. So I was very impressed with that. So my hope here is that your team can bring forward a set of codes that we can consider, not only for new development, but I hope to, and you have it in your plan to some extent, it's kind of inferred more than specific, but how can we help the existing homeowners and apartment owners and others implement additional strategies for conservation. So it's just more detail, more
Sure.
focus, more clarity over where we need to go based on the work foundation that you're already developing here.
I sure appreciate that. And you were on a roll, so I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, I know.
But on May 16th, we're coming with a drought plan and a water conservation plan that includes landscape requirements.
Great. May 16th.
May 16th, and then July 11th is the WaterWise code update, first reading.
Great.
So
Wonderful.
we're
Already moving.
In the queue.
close, we're close.
Okay,
Yeah.
so is it okay if we don't do it at the focus session since it's already? or-
Yeah, I mean, since it's already coming, yeah, I just, again, it's from my vantage point, the more we can provide our constituents and our developers clarity over where
Sure.
we think we need to be going, then we're not up here asking everybody who comes forward,
Sure.
how many drops of water are you going to be producing in that development you're going to build,
Sure.
it's- we can't make any progress that way. So
Yeah.
thank you. That's great.
Yeah, it'd be great to back into it to say, how, instead of saying how much water do you need? We say, so whatever it is that you're going to do, here's how much you're going to be allocated.
Yep.
And then you build into that.
Yep.
That is I don't know I know that Jean and I both read all of our newspapers in the morning. So I don't know if Jean saw it this morning or not, but it was in the Colorado Sun. In California, so they had 16 months to sign off on the plan. So Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, Councilmember Lim, what was the other, and there was one other one. And so we all signed off on what we were going to give up. And California said, thanks, no thanks. We're not giving anything up. So now it goes into this, this is the worst drought that we've been in 1,200 years. So everybody's kind of excited about all the snow that we've gotten.
That's, yeah. Well, and,
Short-lived.
the federal government's also saying already that they're going to veto whatever the states come up with. So,
Yeah.
it's not going to be enough until it's enough, and anything we can do to move in that direction, not just for ourselves, but for, our Western neighbors as well is really crucial.
Completely agree. And I know that all of us are really looking forward to the May and the July updates.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Well, is there anything else? Any other input or? Mayor Pro Tem.
How many add those minutes?
Jennifer, I have a question. This goes back to, I may have missed this, and if I do, I apologize.
Yeah.
The economic updates, they can include anything from like Jeff or mine or someone sort of giving us an update on the business community and where we are.
Yes,
Excellent.
yes.
Anyone else? Yeah, I added up the minutes roughly. It's probably best to do it the day and a half with breaks and lunch. Because it's about 8 hours without the public safety time.
Okay.
So to allow some time to break and tour and,
Yeah, get your butterfly on.
Councilmember Shah.
Thanks, Mayor. So I know that we normally get updates from our district attorney, Brian Mason. Would this be appropriate time to have that in terms of the public safety conversation, or we'd rather wait on that for when he comes and presents to council?
I would rather wait on that.
Okay.
Yeah, our folks will take up that time, and Brian Mason and I and his crew are meeting about the ever increasing bill that Broomfield pays. And really taking a deep dive on what that data looks like. In the past, we've always we have to pay statutorily based on population. And I want to have a deeper conversation about caseload. So it's probably best to have that conversation
First.
and then we'll have an update from the DAs.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
Right. Anything else? Well, I really appreciate this first of its kind inclusive
Yeah.
process to plan our focus session, and thank you. Thank you all for indulging us and for your contributions and input. I think this is going to be really great.
Yeah, I do too.
All right, well, that concludes the items for this evening's study session. There being no further business, the study session is adjourned. Good night.